Thank you very much for being here with us. So, Margot, would you like to start?
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's a morning where I'm right now. Is everything working correctly? You can see the presentation. Yeah. So my name is Margot. I am based in Copenhagen normally, but I'm from Belgium, and I just graduated at the University of Copenhagen in Environment and Development, and I would like to talk about kind of how I approached my thesis together with two other people, which was very much connected to supporting a resistance movement a bit further away, but is very much connected to the degrowth struggles we have also in our countries. And yeah, so I'm going to be talking about my time in Ecuador, where I worked together with an anti-mining movement called Yuturi Warmi. This is also the title of my thesis, which was called Planting Seeds for Re-Existence in the Extractive Zone. And we tried to approach it from a decolonial feminist point of view and actually really collaborate with this resistance movement anti-mining group. And I did it together with two other students from my master. Yeah, so we are we've also together started Degrowth Copenhagen and have been working a lot with that. And so we really approached our thesis from like an activist point of view, that we really wanted to use our privilege and this opportunity of doing field work abroad to actually support a movement that is fighting extractivism on the front lines. But this came with a lot of also like critical questions about positionality and myself, and like, who am I to go to the other side of the world to like go and ask people if we can work together. But luckily, we went to a conference in Brussels about anti-mining, and there we met an activist from Ecuador, and she basically invited us to her community for 3 months, and that's how our collaboration kind of started. Yes, and just to say, I'm also currently in Ecuador. I'm back in the community where we were for 3 months last year, and they are called the community of Serena, which is a Quechua community in the Amazon. And clearly you can see that they say no to mining. They're located, in the middle of Ecuador, in the Napo province, and sorry if it's a bit loud here. I'm sitting next to the road. I was trying to find a quiet space, but it's a bit hard. But yeah. So yeah, you can see with the arrow, this is the Serena community where I'm staying. The active mines of gold mining and other material, but primarily gold mining. And so this whole these areas to mining companies. So they are living upstream of the mining. So luckily not yet the contamination has not yet entered the community, but they're kind of the last community down that river that has been able to say no to the mining and resists this extractivism. Yeah, I can show you, but this is a drone footage we took very close by, like just at the border of the community. Is everything working? Because it's kind of lagging a bit. Yeah, this you can see this excavators, and like they contaminate the area with mercury and gasoline. And so these are the women of the community. They're called Yuturi Warmi, which means just waiting for the bus to pass by, which means bullet ant women in Quechua, because the bullet ant is kind of their metaphor. It's an ant that's super big and it's very painful, the bites. And when something comes to threaten their territory, they all come together and like attack the person who's threatening the territory. So this is kind of their metaphor, related also to Quechua language. And so this is a picture of So we went there, we were thinking, oh, how can we do our thesis, but also really think about how can they benefit from this and what are their needs? How can we support their needs as like privileged students from Europe who also got money from the university to do this? So like, how can we spend this money and use our connections in Europe to actually support their struggle of keeping the fight ongoing against gold mining. And this is just a picture of like a workshop we did, which was called Cuerpo Territorio, or body territory in English, which is like a way that they were able to explore their connection of their bodies to the lands. And because it's something as like Westerners, we don't really understand this connection that they have. And at least for me, it's something, yeah, very different from how I live and how I am connected to a territory. Or so that's kind of one example of a methodology we did. And then they also sell artisanal jewelry to kind of fund their struggles. And just giving a few examples that they do. There's so much to talk about that it's a bit hard to say in 5 minutes. But so when we were there, we also made a crowdfunding video and started a crowdfunding campaign, which I will show later, which you can find and watch the video as well. We did it collaboratively, so they decided what to say in the video and how we were filming it. And this, in the end, I think in total, we collected like $5,000, which has really helped them to start building. They want to actually, their dream is to do kind of community tourism, but in a way that supports their resistance. And I think there's a lot to say about tourism from a degrowth perspective, but this is really kind of the only way that they see that they could have a sustainable income whilst keeping the fight against gold mining. Yeah, so we also helped sell some of these artisanal jewelries, and I don't think we have time maybe for this video. Yeah, but I will show everything at the end. You can see the presentation afterwards. Just to note, I'm also back now to visit them because we really built like really good relationship. And we also started filming a documentary when we were here last year. That was actually something that they asked us to do, to like share their struggle in Europe and to actually collect more funds from people to, yeah, for them to keep fighting the anti-mining activism that they do. So I'm back to actually finish that documentary, which I will also show in Oslo at the conference. Yes, but so this is kind of a slide to talk a bit about, like, I find it a bit hard to talk about this in like a degrowth space, because I think a lot of these things are looked down upon, or I don't know, it's like a very sensitive space to talk about. But for me and my experience, I think how they actually collaborated with us, they were very happy that we arrived and we joined their struggle, and that they also told us like, this is what we need, can you support us with this? Like they really had their agency in asking us on like how we could help, and it wasn't us telling them how to, yeah, that we could just do this and this. And I don't know if I'm explaining myself correctly, but these are just a bit of the reflections I had whilst being there, because it's a very privileged thing that us activists from Europe can just go here, experience their struggles for a little bit, and then go back to our previous comfortable lives back home. So that's something I'm really, yeah, reflecting on a lot. And also how our presence here as foreigners can like also influence like maybe inequalities in the community, or that they also start being more dependent on foreign funding, which are all questions that, yeah, that we should think about. But at the same time, it's really them who they were able to decide like what this collaboration looked like. And yeah, so it's a bit, thinking about, okay, we can be very critical from our perspective, but it's also interesting to see what they think and what they think collaboration with these different groups can look like. Yes. I don't know how I am with time, Amarisa. Did I do it?
You did well. We will manage. Don't worry. I think these interventions are interesting to keep them and help reflect upon them. I would suggest, however, to take any questions
Yes.
at the end after we finish all the presentations. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. I just want to share the QR codes to the crowdfunding campaign that's still ongoing, and also to their Instagram, because I think it's I would really like for more people to follow them, and they are also very open to having more people come and support them in different ways. They really ask for me to tell all my friends and all my network back home to come and to see how they live, because they also have like agroforestry farms, they have medicinal plants, like also their cultural practices are, they just want to share with a lot of people. And I think that's kind of the resistance tourism that they talk about. They really want people to come and support their struggle, whilst they can also kind of preserve and share their cultural and like daily practices, which from a degrowth perspective, you can say it's kind of prefigurative how they live, and but not to also romanticize this way of living, because it's also very hard, and they're also like really struggling to survive, and which is something I also think is very important to note, that yeah, it's not an easy way to live, but they want to keep living this way because they could say yes to mining to then get a sum of money, and like be able to buy things or not have to work in the farms anymore. But that's not what they want. They actually want to keep their way of living by saying no to mining, and to also like not contaminate their territory, and they can keep reproducing life for future generations, which is kind of what they always say. Yeah. And then if you want to contact me, you can also just contact me on LinkedIn or email. I would really love to talk to more people about this and like discuss also and see what you have to say. Because there is a lot to say about this, but it's yeah, for me, it has been a very valuable experience. And again, I came back just because I enjoyed my time here so much, and because I feel like this is just the beginning of a relationship. I can't just set this aside and keep on living. Like I want to, keep building on these relationships and these collaborations, because I think it's important for us degrowthers to be in contact with these kind of resistance movements. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Margot. Thank you very much. And now we can move on to Sarah. Sarah, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, yeah, I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay. Let's hope it works. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Amazing. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I have just finished my QTL degree at the Autonomous University of Barcelona. I'm a political activist. I've worked in conservation and climate policy for the past 10 years. And for the next few years, I intend to conduct all sorts of degrowth research into policies, governance, geopolitics. Currently, for wage labor, I lead communications at Rethinking Economics International, and I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. So, I will be talking about communicating degrowth because a lot of us are here and we all talk about degrowth in our circles, and we all wonder, what the best way is, what the best platform is, and there's a lot of questions about this day to day. And I just thought, maybe we should all just pool our skills and talk about it and talk about what the best ways are. So what is degrowth communication? You can also put this in the chat while we're talking, or you can use the QR code, either, whatever is easiest. So essentially for me, sorry, I'm just going to put because I'm in work hours right now. Yeah, so essentially, what is degrowth communication? What is the idea of degrowth communication? What is the purpose? The purpose of degrowth communication is that it is the use of useful strategies that we deploy to inform, inspire, and mobilize individuals and communities around the ideas and values and practices of degrowth. And what is the aim of this communication? The aim is to challenge the dominant growth based narratives, to promote ecological justice and sufficiency within planetary boundaries, and to support collective action towards this socio-ecological transformation that we envision. That's a lot of words, sorry. So essentially, who can be a degrowth communicator? Anybody. You don't need to have a PhD, you don't need to be enrolled in a master's degree or a bachelor's degree in degrowth or in a course. All you need to do is to read about degrowth, make sense of it, and start talking about it, essentially, because, well, in brackets or outside of brackets, we don't have time. So yeah, I'm just gonna go into some things to bear in mind. That is a bear in mind. Uh, Essentially, good questions, important questions to ask before you start communicating degrowth are: why are you doing this? What is your aim? What is it that you're trying to change? Why should the people that you're talking to care? you know, and does it matter? Because you could be talking about degrowth all you want, but if you don't have an interesting way to package it, if you don't have a goal in mind, it could all go very wrong. For example, if you're talking to a policymaker and you're going to be using language that they don't understand or that they don't want to understand or that doesn't look operationalizable to them, it's not going to matter. In the same way, if you're going into a local community and talking to them about degrowth, and if you talk very tall and broad about socio-ecological transformation and not issues that are local and important to them, it's not going to matter. So yeah, essentially, a good start would be knowing your audience. Are you talking to a person in school? Are you talking to a researcher? Are you talking to somebody working in climate or academics? Are you talking to a teacher? Those questions are important to answer. So broadly, I classify our target audiences as, of course, the lay public can have a lot of subsets, but then the lay public, media, policymakers are some of the main audiences that we tend to go for in our degrowth communication. When are you going to make this communication? Is it going to be during a casual conversation? Is it going to be at a talk? Is it going to be positioned at a conference? How are you going to, package this confirmation and communication, and what it's going to be are also very important considerations to make. I'm going to rush through all of these slides because we only have 10 minutes, but it's important to use analogies and visuals. For example, you're talking about climate change and you're saying, you're talking degrees and you're talking about deforestation and metrics like that. And you're saying, 28% of the Amazon or is cleared on XYZ day. Instead, use metrics that people might be able to visualize and understand. For example, you can say there are 300 football fields worth of deforestation that happens every day across the entirety of the world's rainforests, So maybe people might be able to visualize that better. Another thing, very important thing to remember, is to cut out the jargon. Do not use complicated language. People do not like to feel out of their depth in conversations. So if you're talking about climate and you're going to say, the IPCC says this, don't say that. Many people, we might know about the IPCC, or like some of us might know about the IPCC who are climate, who are working in climate, but most people don't. So, instead of saying the IPCC, say that, a big study led by lots of experts and scientists is trying to tell us what is happening to the earth, for example. Another thing that we tend to do a lot is in our lives, and even I've seen myself do that a lot, is saying things like, obviously, but as you know, no, I don't know. And no, it's not obvious, So whenever we're talking about degrowth and allied issues, try to not talk down and try to not assume that people know the basics and the boundaries and the foundations of the issues that you're talking about. And again, use stories. Talk about your life related to the person and the audiences that you're talking about and their lives when you introduce the concept of degrowth. tailor your message. Do not talk about icebergs and polar bears to people who are not living around icebergs and snow and polar bears, for example. This is something that the climate movement has gotten accused of doing over and over again. And we are still in a place where we're still trying to, differentiate between concepts like climate and weather and real basics. And the climate world is still struggling with it. I don't think we have the time, and degrowth cannot afford to fall into these huge black holes of communication. We need to be clear, we need to be simple to understand, and we need that to happen right now. Again, localize, localize, localize. Root things in people's social and actual material realities instead of talking about, building pies in the sky. um, Again, my friend JP always tells me, Sarah, talk about bread and butter issues. And what JP told me has turned into a slide here with literal bread on the screen. Talk about issues that affect people in their reality and in their present instead of talking about these transformations. It's amazing that we want to go over these social ecological transformations, but it would not matter if they are not really addressing what people are facing right now. People are facing a cost of living crisis. People are being hit by flash floods in other parts of the world. People are in precarious job contracts. Talk about how degrowth and the policies that it presents is going to address these problems. Um, Again, this is just a little table which I'm going to rush through, where these are different audiences and what the tailored message should look like, for example. So essentially, when you're talking to a young adult, they care about climate issues, so talk about what that could look like. If you're talking to farmers in rural communities, talk about how policies and degrowth could mean better things for them. And also, whenever you're talking, talk about actionables, talk about how people and their processes could look like at the center of these policy proposals that you speak of. Um, Again, this is how I see like sort of like the cycle where, okay, we have academia that is coming out with all of these papers, which maybe nobody's reading, and then we have the media that may or may not pick it up, and then there's the public at the end. We should come in between the science and the evidence and between the media. So we have to be that middleman who helps to bridge the gap between science and policy, between science and action, between science and advocacy. So we have a very important role to play in this. Um, a little about finding modes of communicating. We have to find our vehicle, find what's most comfortable to you, assess your resources. You do not have to have something with lots of high production value. Start with what you have. A lot of good stuff can be done by starting with what you have. Pick a medium, take a crack at it. It could be podcast, it could be art, it could be video. Some amazing examples are here. There's Kanika, who's part of the IDN. She's done amazing stuff with just talking about degrowth on LinkedIn. There's JP's website, explore.degrowth.net, which does a lot of amazing stuff. There's Natalie's newsletter example. She talks about people and how they come into degrowth. There's Amarissa's new and very gorgeous tool to learn and plan for degrowth and deploy it into classrooms, workplaces. There's also Amelia's tools on degrowth and multilateralism. So, I mean, find your audiences and find your field. You don't necessarily have to do a lot of gymnastics and place yourself in a point and an aspect and dimension where you're not comfortable. Start where you are with what you have, with the tools that you have at your disposal. Yeah, and it doesn't all have to be academic. I need to keep repeating this. You do not have to be academic. You do not need to publish papers. There is enough out there for you to start. You need to just gain an understanding and convert that into something that you feel comfortable talking about, and that and go out there. Don't say no to opportunities, and don't say no to soapboxes. Get on that chair, stand up on it, and start talking about it. That's the only way you're going to get better at it. Yeah, and feel free to take it everywhere and anywhere, basically. I mean, I use the word gymnastics here. I am literally trying to do a move, but it doesn't have to be that literal. But yeah, I mean, use your vehicle and get going. And so essentially what we talked about was, know your whys, know who you're going to be talking to, know when you're going to be hosting these interventions and talks and, communications moments, know what it's going to be about, and also how you're going to do it. Yeah, and some things to keep in mind are always when you're talking about degrowth, always stop and, you know, think and reflect about if you're the best person to be doing that communication, to be deploying that communication, and if passing the mic would be a better idea on that one. Suppose you're going to a community who you do not know very well, but you have this opportunity. So maybe find somebody from that community or someone who's adjacent and closer to that community, because it's always less alienating to speak to someone, to listen to someone talking when they're from your community. So always think about that as well. And also think about who's not present on the table and why they're not present. You know, who's not in the room. Are you excluding someone, and how you could find a way to include them, and change your communication accordingly in order to not make them feel alienated. Yeah, and be approachable again with your language, not just spoken language, but your body language, as well as the examples that you give. Make them relatable. Don't make them something so, for example, right now we're in Europe, but if you're going and talking about degrowth to an audience that's not European, make sure that your examples are not, again, making them feel out of depth or making them feel like they need to be in Europe to understand this. Again, reflect every time you're talking about degrowth, during, before, and after, and ask for feedback, ask how you did. And yeah, just go out there and do it again. So yeah, if you want, you can use this QR code, or you can use the chat box to talk about how you're going to talk about degrowth. This is where you can reach me, or just reach Amarissa. She will tell you how to reach me. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Sarah. And I think we make a nice bridge with Emma, Emma Jane Park, because I mentioned all the full names of the previous presenters. I have to do the same. I didn't mention Emma in the beginning because I forgot, but she proposed to give also a short presentation about access, and I think it bridges very well with what Sarah was presenting. So Sarah, please. And of course, I will. I mean, the agenda as it is now, it has changed, but don't worry about it. I think it's very meaningful what we are doing here. So we will have enough time to move to the breakout sessions afterwards. Emma, please.
Thank you, Amarissa. I love my full name being used. I feel very official in lots of ways. As I said earlier, my name is Emma. My pronouns are they, she, and I'm a white Scottish person in my late 30s with blonde hair tied in a high ponytail, blue eyes and large glasses. And I'm sat beside a tall bookcase as I speak to you. And if we ever meet in person, you might see me walking with a mobility aid or lying down in non-conventional spaces. Also, I often gesture with my hands and pull a lot of faces as I talk. So if you're around me and you hear people laughing when I speak, that is usually the reason why. As I speak today, you can look at the screen, you can follow those things, but also feel free to look out of your window, wander around and make yourself comfortable. And I don't describe myself to you before I speak because I particularly enjoy drawing attention to how I look. I share it because when I'm dreaming of a degrowth future, I dream of a world where my blind and visually impaired friends and peers are not just included, but they're centred in how we structure society. And my practice in access tells me that this starts with things like giving a visual description, because we all know that information is power. And I always hear in the degrowth movement that education, communication, and shared knowledge are tools for liberation. Yet in over a decade of engaging with degrowth and degrowth spaces, I've found a regular glaring exclusion. And that is that accessibility is consistently overlooked, and disability justice, if featured anywhere, it's more often a footnote in a theory than it is a practice. And this for me is a really painful thing to hear, because this space as it exists now is not building a future where I survive. And I mean that really quite literally. In response to direct questions in very academic sessions about how we could live in certain villages that are being built to demonstrate degrowth, I've been offered descriptions of conditions under which I and many like me would not live, not because of climate collapse, not because of economic collapse, but because our needs were simply not planned for. We have been written out of a future before it's even here. And that's really sad, because there are loads of disabled people and access practitioners and care workers and artists and thinkers who already know how to build accessible, sustainable futures. And these are people who embody interdependence, who resist extractivist logic simply by honouring their bodies. And these people are not centred in the degrowth movement. Instead, this so-called movement, I keep saying that in inverted commas for anyone that can't see me because I have questions about whether we're a movement or not, keeps designing these futures without any of that knowledge, as if we don't really understand the cultural violence of exclusion. As a side note, and it feels dangerous to say this, but I'm gonna, when fascists overlook disability justice, I'm actually not that offended. I don't really expect care from systems that are designed to harm. And like in a really perverse way, I kind of appreciate how their clarity creates like a really easy space for resistance. People literally want me dead. So I can just say, please stop wanting me dead. Whereas when I then come into the degrowth movement, access is ignored whilst also claiming justice and inclusion. And that's not just disappointing, it's quite disorientating. And on an everyday level, it's just bloody exhausting to be told you belong, but not given the tools to hang around, and to be told that your presence matters, but to be made to feel like a burden for asking for reasonable adjustments isn't worth sticking around for. I often watch events go without captions, without pacing for fatigue, and without flexible formats. And I regularly hear the words care and equity ring out across stages from very clever people, while my disabled friends are forced to leave the room or sit in discomfort, or more likely are never invited at all. And for me, as someone who's quite academic and geeky, what's even more frustrating about all of this is that there are some really clever people in these rooms. Like through degrowth, I have met some people who just make me feel like I have the brain of an amoeba. Like I just don't get how clever some of these people are. And yet they can't seem to make the connection that when we don't centre disabled people, what we're really centering is productivity, convenience, and homogeny. And so we're literally rebuilding the very system we claim that we want to dismantle. And that kind of hypocrisy, in my experience, has undermined any activist movement in the past 100 years, and all of them far more established than ours. And I think it will undo us too, unless we shift it. So I'm here to say today, to really say that disability justice is not an afterthought, it's foundational. And as a little bit of theory, because I know there'll be academics here, there is a social model of disability. And it taught the world that people are not disabled by their bodies, and they are not less able than another, but they are disabled by their environment. People who are really connected to the disability justice movement actually find that perspective quite old-fashioned. And there's a model that they're working with much more called the affirmative model, which celebrates the glorious world of living in and with a disabled body. And in degrowth, I think it's great because I'd like you to take me as an example, because I live with chronic pain and chronic fatigue. So my body quite literally refuses to push through, refuses to be exploited, and refuses to play by the rules of consumerism and productivity. I am quite literally a living, breathing embodiment of anti-capitalism, and I feel like you should all really worship me as some kind of a deity and framework and thing to follow, because all of the theories that I hear people talk about, I have to live with them, and I really don't have a choice. What I do need is for the world to catch up, and this world in particular. So today I've had 5 minutes and I really thought about using the time to list some ways in which we can make things more accessible. But that's really dangerous because it's not a tick sheet. It's a cultural shift. I can provide those resources, but if you're serious, this work starts with you. And you'll never know it all because all bodies are always in flux. Disability is one of the few ways in which people are marginalised that can happen to any single person overnight in a heartbeat. It happens to us all as we age, and it can happen at any stage of life. And so for me, this is the work. It is not optional. It's radical access, and it's not just about ramps and captions and documents and interpreters. It's about constantly recognising our different energies, tempos and ways of being in the world and being led by that from the beginning. It's been over 60 years since the start of the disability rights movement, and yet we're still building futures without disabled people. It's not ignorance, it's culture, but culture can be unlearned and relearned. And so with that, please carry forward with you that if your degrowth future doesn't include being led and built with disabled people, it is not a future worth growing into. Thank you for giving me some space.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you very much. Okay, so we move on. And I wish we could actually have much more time to go deep into all these topics, but you will try to go deep into these topics in your discussions. But yeah, so Hans, would you like to go next?
Yes, please. It's a pleasure to be here, and we'll have a much more boring topic and a much more boring speaker, actually, of course, as well. So I'm not an expert too on this topic at all, but I will give like a little bit share the bit of our experience when we organized our small degrowth conference in Lisbon. And I'm a member of the Portuguese Degrowth Network that was founded in 2018. So we are a network that has like a local groups, so where we meet in person actually, and then we have a platform. It's Element nowadays, and where we have circles, so that thematic circles around issues, yeah, circles, and also all the administrative part actually of our network is done online, and then we meet up 2 times a year with people from all over Portugal, with the participation that can be done online as well. So that is all about our organization. So we allow, I think there are 20 to 30 people are really active in this network. Actually, it could be more. You can check out our website if you want to, and use the machine translation from Portuguese to English or any other language. So we were obviously inspired by the Beyond Growth conference. I took part in the European Parliament. I was there myself, and as you know, there were many people and many organizations that tried to do like a national Beyond Growth conference in their own parliaments. So we also tried to do that in the Portuguese Parliament. We had some problems because there were snap elections called, so we had to postpone our event, and obviously we didn't make it to the plenary, but only to another room and small auditorium that is a new wing of the parliament. So we cannot be too ambitious actually, and we ended up teaming up. We ended up teaming up being the beginning with Zero. Zero is an environmental organization here in Portugal, and they are members of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, of the Iberia Hub of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. Yeah, that was the start, and then later with Oikos, and we had some other partners as well. And so we organized it it happened then in December last year. And actually, in our conference, and that had to do with the partners that we managed to get, and it was also useful to get us actually into the parliament, yeah, because that Zero is very well connected, and also to the politicians, because they don't want to open up these spaces actually for conversations about degrowth, yeah. So what was the first part in the morning, that was more about the law for the future generations. And as you might know, in Wales, there's a commissioner for future generations that started in 2015. And we had with us Sophie Ho, that was the first commissioner for future generations. So it was this act. I think it's a very, very interesting actually experience. It's worthwhile to check it out on their website. I have lots of information. It's a little bit built around the Sustainable Development Goals, and obviously degrowth, we are very critical about this. But in practice, it's not a bad entry point in my opinion. But we can discuss this later as well. So Susanna from ZRC presented a proposal for a law for the future generations in Portugal. Then we had Filipe Martins, who happens to be Portuguese as well. He is center of the Social Center for the Jesuits in Brussels and member of this Fit for Future Generations Europe. And he talked about their experience in Europe, like a lobbying group. And then last thing in the morning, we had the politicians from a larger spectrum of the Portuguese parliament that were debating with us about these questions. So we wanted to get them actually interested in the subject. And then in the afternoon, so that was in the afternoon was a part more organized by us, the degrowthers actually. So we started out with a presentation from Morena Hanbury Lemos, many of you might know her. She's a doctoral student at the University of Barcelona with Jason Hickless, the supervisor. And she talked about a subject, actually, and we asked her to talk about the subject, actually, about this relation between global North and global South, actually. So it connects very much to the talk we had and to the conversation we had on Tuesday, actually, about the delinking and the exploitation of the resources and the workforce in the global South by the global North. Actually, I think it's very important to bring this into the conversation. Then next we had like a panel discussion with academics from various areas like environmental sciences, economics, from community organizers, and linked also to the movement for the citizens assemblies and politicians and philosophers also. These are people actually concerned with growth economy, but not naturally degrowthers. So we try to bring these people into the conversation as well. And then the finishing a conference was done by Ines Korsman, who maybe some know her because he published a paper together with Timothy Parrick and Nick Fitzpatrick about degrowth policy proposals. Yeah, so they made this mapping of degrowth policy proposals. So she talked about this more concrete degrowth policy proposals that can be applied, like done in law, if you want so. So that was this conference that we organized. Obviously, we can discuss a lot about what means this well-being economy alliance to us. Yeah? So it has been discussed also from different angles in the degrowth community. So some favor actually is that it can be a good entry point. Others says, like Hubert Buch-Hansen in a recent paper said, right, degrowth should be disentangled from the well-being economy because it doesn't question the system, because we have actually dismantled capitalism, yeah, because capitalism is incompatible with degrowth. So that it can be debatable, actually, the option that we did it together with these other organizations, but at the same time, this gave us the opportunity to talk about degrowth in the parliament. And actually, that was our smaller experience. We had about like 80 to 100 people that attended this conference for a small country like Portugal. I think it was not too bad. We did a report, but in the meantime, we have another snap election now that will happen in 3 weeks' time. And so the political situation is quite unstable here in Portugal, and probably the far right, they will rise again. But we will publish this report on the conference proceedings shortly, and we can share it afterwards as well. But obviously, it will be in Portuguese. Yeah. And actually, that's all what I have to say. We can keep the question and answers for later as Amarisa proposed, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Hans. Thank you. So we can move on to Hugo. Hugo, where are you? Hugo? Here.
I'm here. Thanks a lot. I'm gonna just share my screen. I'm gonna be brief. No worries. Yes, I know we are good on time. Can you see? You can see? Okay, so let's go.
Go.
Thank you. So, well, I'm gonna talk about a bit on my experience, the collective experiences I have had on mobilizing the growth on policy and politics in Spain, particularly in the context of Spain. So first of all, just to say that the entry point for me for the growth was activism, climate activism. So I was engaging since I went to university. I was 18, engaging in Fridays for Future and different climate justice movement. And I was at the same time, since the beginning, aware and acknowledging the importance of also engaging in formal politics in some way, because we were mobilizing several mottos on the demonstrations. We were calling for radical change, and at the same time, I was aware and more people that we had to push for these things in the current institutions, even if it is imperfect. And I was aware that I could, because of my way of engaging in mediation or my personality, I was able to contribute in that spaces in which we try to bring degrowth and radical ideas into politics. So I was aware that I should use this privilege also of acknowledging my privilege as a person that I'm able to involve in politics because I have because of economic security. That's something that is not talked about a lot. But when you want to engage in activism in the same time in politics, if you are not having enough resources and time, it's so hard in the current societies because capitalist systems work in creating this artificial scarcity also in time for involvement and system change. So I was aware I had to put this privilege in the service also of trying to change the institutions that are reproducing the current system. So I'm just gonna talk about this short timeline. In these last 3 years, I have been involved in several projects related to degrowth in institutional politics, and I just wanted to have this short track and comments and insights that came from that. So in May 2022, United Left, Izquierda Unida, a party in Spain that currently is in government, launched an initiative that was called Degrowth to Live, de Crecer para Vivir. I was invited to that event as a member of the Youth Spanish Greens in that moment. And I took part in the conversations. I was really impressed that degrowth was mobilized, not just implicitly, but explicitly with the term. And here you have the Minister of Consumption, the former Minister of Consumption in Spain, Alberto Garzón, and the MP in the European Parliament, Sira Rego. And they were openly talking about a degrowth proposal. And I was also, and I appreciate a lot also how they create a safe space in terms of how can we discuss this explicitly. They also mobilized a survey in the party, and we were also from the Green Party and from Podemos and other progressive parties coming to this space to talk together, also with trade unions, members from social movements such as Extinction Rebellion. So it was a really exciting moment to bring these conversations and to expand these conversations. And the following year, in 2023, we had snap elections, early elections in Spain. Because of different conditions, I was a candidate in my district in the south of Spain. And I was really thinking about how to translate all these conversations that had happened the year before in a more intimate and closer space to a political campaign. In a moment, we were also trying to avoid the far right taking power in Spain, but at the same time trying to advance a progressive political movement that goes beyond the idea of economic growth. Also, as you know, in the left is also really, usually these productivist ideas are still really ingrained in the discourses on creating employment, on reducing deficit, and how to mobilize other imaginaries on the economy, other imaginaries on society through a political campaign was my main question when I was starting this process. And it was really encouraging to see that different activists and scholars, such as Yayo Herrero, an ecofeminist scholar activist, were invited to initiate a process some months ago before the elections to draft a document that would be the base for the platform of this. I have to say, well, just to comment as Sumar, this was a platform uniting all the left parties and green parties for the first time in the history of the regime, of the democratic regime in Spain, under a single candidature. So this document was created in in a collaborative process with social movements, and the document included degrowth in an explicit way. It called explicitly about a planned degrowth, applying principles of just eco-social transition. And I was really encouraged by that when I started the campaign, but at the same time, the translation process from this document, this initial draft, to the official program was a bit discouraging in some aspects, because the word degrowth, for instance, was not included. Also, many of the measures like work time reductions or more social protection, as well as the reduction in energy and economic throughput, global justice issues, were considered in the program. But it's important to mention that in this translation process, from the political base to the platform to the program, it was key that some activists, degrowth activists, we were engaged also in trying to make this translation as accurate as possible to the growth visions and ideas. And then in the campaign, during that 15 days in my district in the south of Spain, in Castilla-La Mancha, I was not mobilizing explicitly the word degrowth, but I talk a lot about degrowth. I talked about agroecology, social and solidarity economy, work time reductions, and many other measures we have in our program. Sometimes even in many conversations beyond the public speeches, I was talking about degrowth explicitly also. No? So this was a common imaginary that was mobilized. And as you probably know, Sumar is currently in the government in Spain in coalition with the Socialist Party, which had many problems in that sense of power imbalances to try to mobilize the issue. And now the political landscape has also shifted. But now we have also in the coming week, the Council of Ministers is going to approve a reduction in working time reduction that's going to go to the Congreso in Spain. And even in spite of the many limitations we had, I realized that it was important that we, the growthers, engage explicitly in these platforms and took a space and tried to collaborate and influence the political process. And then in 2024, in the International Degrowth Conference in Pontevedra, that was in Spain, I was invited to represent the Green Party in the panel with different parties. Juanjo, that is also here in this call, was representing Podemos. So we were there trying to bring the more critical voices in our parties on growth into this panel. And it was great to see that, in general, all the parties in the left were acknowledging that the growth is the way forward if we talk about sustainability. And these spaces were really encouraging, for instance, in our case, in the Spanish Green Party, to create and generate a platform, a resolution in favor of the growth. So these were opportunities to be more explicit and to try to mobilize these discourses. And in the case of Spain, the moment and the context was ripe in that sense. And then also I was engaged, and I'm still engaged, in the Beyond Growth platform, the Federation of Young European Greens. And in the General Assembly in Dublin in August 2024, we worked on a resolution, and it was unanimously approved by the 35 organizations that come from this organization, this federation, that are mainly the youth wing of the Green parties in Europe. And we were explicitly talking about the growth, and we were mobilizing different research in a clear way, and we were included also many policy proposals. So just to say before just concluding with some insights and recommendations, when you are defending the growth in these kinds of spaces, you also have to bear with the consequences of when the parties or the political spaces are shifting their directions. You also have to take your energies to other places where you can be more effective for advancing the growth. And this is why 1 month ago, I decided to leave the Green Party. I left the Green Party because the position of the European Greens, they were not actively opposing the rearmament plan in Europe, the increase in defense and military expenditure. And even though the Green Party was critical on that, the majority of the executive committee decided to sign a resolution in favor of this increase in defense spending. So I could not, it was a really hard situation because I had to let an organization in which I had been working for 7 years, and I had influenced a lot of the process. The relation is still good at the personal level with many of these persons, and I engage also in this political space. But yes, I wanted to say that sometimes these parties became an end in themselves. And when you try to do a more activist, politically oriented, like radical politics, it's not sometimes so so easy to create these long-lasting relations, but it's important to feel that we are connecting, networking beyond political organizations, accredited platforms. And this is the place where my insights, recommendations that are part of a collective reflective process that many of you here are part of. I just want to finish with these 4 ideas that for me have been inspiring in the last months. One of them is that I really believe that we have to go now beyond policy advocacy. When we want to transform the political system, because even if policy advocacy is key in this current moment, and there are NGOs and other think tanks that are doing a great work in that sense, it's key that we take part in the structures where policy debates and policy formulation happen and engage more people in the conversation from an intersectional perspective, and not just talking about state politics, that was mainly my case, but also local politics, regional politics, and even ways beyond institutional politics, that we can also talk about policies beyond formal policies. For instance, the food social security in France was initiated also by social movements in the countryside. So we have to be creative also in that sense of how can we mobilize policy debates beyond institutions, but also within the formal institutions that are still the instruments we have at hand. Secondly, I think it's key that we build political organizations that embody and enact degrowth principles, going beyond just political campaigning in the short term. And for that, we need to create political platforms around degrowth. Like, for instance, the Beyond Growth conferences, I know some of them that have resulted in Beyond Growth platforms in several countries, in Portugal, in Italy, in Austria. We are trying the same now, organizing a conference in Spain in September, but also building degrowth and eco-socialist platforms, uniting activists, critical academia, and social movements and parties around these ideas. In third place, I think it's key, and this explains also the decision I took about the Green Party, that we have to bring anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist orientations to the policies that are already on the table at the hand, not just bringing the growth proposals, but trying to orient these proposals in this way, building solidarities with the working class and the global majority. Because in many cases, and I have realized in my political trajectory, in many cases, progressive politics is just about greening the imperial mode of living if you are not including the global dimensions. As for instance, yesterday we were talking, on Tuesday, Emilia was presenting about the linking, and also how can we connect our political movements on degrowth in the north with emancipatory movements in the south. And we have to do that also with the working class in the north, and we have to do that constantly to undo this bias of the privileged people, more well-off, doing politics and defending their privileges. And lastly, as also Sarah was saying, we have to be in between people, between academia, science, and policies. And we need a lot of these people to really bridge the gap between policies and academia. And I'm convinced that we are, from the International Degrowth Network and the Assembly, we are going to be doing that. And yeah, I'm just sharing this exciting example of Spain because the debate is ripe, but I'm sure we can expand, and there are many other experiences in many other places. So thank you a lot, and also happy to, if you have any questions.
Oh, thank you so much, everyone, for these presentations. I know we took a lot of time, but I think it was worth it. One thing that I may suggest is just reflect a bit on the presentations and maybe add your questions in the chat. And let's take 10 minutes break. I think that would be important. 10 minutes break, and then we will return where we will split in groups. We will not have enough time to respond to the questions like online as we are here, but maybe we can continue discussing in the chat somehow. And also the information that we share in the chat, because this is also kind of recorded, it will also be shared with you afterwards. So don't worry, you will not miss all the things that is currently taking place there. So in 10 minutes, and we return we will turn back and we will split in groups. Please add any questions, reflections. I see that there is already some kind of movement here. Please continue doing that, and see you in 10 minutes. Okay, thank you.